What you got there?
Tomato.
Is that from your garden?
In Bell, Oregon, we can grow almost anything.
This has to be
There's a place out past old Bully Creek Road where all the willows weep and the locals go. We break out the fiddles and sing at the sky. Cattails join swing side to side. We're gonna dance all night as a firefly. Shimmer, shimmer, shimmer.
How do you break up the ground and soil so you can, with what kind of tray?
Well, it all starts in the fall. If you're preparing for an onion crop next spring, it all starts in the fall, okay?
Okay.
And you have to come in and you have to rip the soil deep and plow it so you get it loose and get all the old nutrients turned over. And then after you do that, you work the ground flat, okay? You put on any fertilizer that you have to at that time. And then we come in and we do a process that we call bedding, okay? And we prepare the seed bed for next spring. All this is done in the fall. And you come in and you make little mounds across the field, and in those mounds is where you're going to plant the seed next spring. So we make 4, 5, sometimes 6 trips with the tractors in the fall, preparing the ground for the crop next spring. Did I answer your question okay?
Yeah.
Okay. That is a good question, and I don't know if I know the exact answer to that one either. But I know when you cut an onion open, it doesn't make you cry on the outside. When you have it like this, it's A-OK, no problem. The problem is when you cut it inside and you're exposed to all those juices and stuff that are inside the onion, that's when you have the problem. So if you don't want to cry, don't cut it open. You can't grow onions on ground year after year after year, okay? If you do that, every year the onions get a little smaller and a little smaller and a little smaller because there's certain inherent diseases and stuff that onions have. So in order to produce good onions every year, you can really only plant onions in a field about 1 year out of every 4 or 5, okay? So in between there, we have to plant other crops. We plant sugar beets, we plant grain, plant alfalfa, we plant corn, so we grow all those other things, so we have what we call a crop rotation. And by doing that, it allows you to grow better crops every year. Not just onions, but the same holds true for a lot of other crops as well.
Why do onions have skins?
Why do they have skins? That's a good question. I think, and I'm not exactly sure of this either, but I think it's to protect the onion so it doesn't get bruised and beat up. On the outer shucks here, you have all these outer papery scales, and those actually protect the onion so the fleshy part in here does not get bruised and beat up. So I think it's more for protection.
How do you make onion rings?
How do you make onion rings? That's a good question.
No.
There's different varieties of onions, different kinds, and some are bred specifically to make onion rings, and others do not make good onion rings. If you take an onion, and I'm not sure, these should do fairly well, but if you take an onion and you cut into the middle, I hope you don't cry now. That is a dull knife. Oh yeah, this one will do okay. All right. An onion is a little bit like a tree, okay, for the fact that it has these rings, okay? And for every leaf that is on the onion plant, you have one ring that's here in this bowl, okay? And that's why you have to have a sturdy, healthy top to have a big onion. And if you take this onion and you cut it around like this really sharp knife, when you get done here, you have all these layers, okay? And if you take this outside one off, there's an onion ring. And you go all the way down, you get to smaller and smaller. This onion here, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, has 7 good rings in it. The biggest pest that we have is called onion thrips, okay? And that is a little tiny bug that you almost have to have a microscope to see, okay? But he comes into the onion and basically he sucks all the juices out of the onion tops. And if you see an onion field that's turning brown real early or dies real early, probably they didn't do a good job of controlling the thrips. And they can also they carry some diseases with them. And once they sting the plant, they inject that disease into the plant. And so it's a very bothersome pest for us. And they're hard to control, and they're kind of expensive to control. Once the seed is planted in the spring, like I say, a lot of preparation goes into the ground in the fall. And we put down some fertilizer in the fall. But then after the seeds come up, then the battle starts for the weeds, keeping the weeds out and all that. And we do that both with machine and with chemicals. And it really just depends on the year and the field. Some fields are sprayed maybe 4 or 5 times a year for weeds. They're probably sprayed 4 or 5 times a year for bugs. And so it's a constant monitoring process to just determine what weeds you have and what bugs you have. And we get a lot of help from advisors, crop advisors, county extension agents, people like that help us make decisions as far as how bad the bugs are, what chemicals to apply, and give us instructions so that we apply them in a safe manner, so we don't put on too much and so it doesn't damage the onions for consumers. All of our chemicals and everything that's put on, it's required that we just put a certain amount on at a certain rate. Otherwise it might not be safe. It might leave too much chemical in the plant later on, and it might not be safe to eat. So that's one thing we're very careful of, because we want everybody to enjoy eating our onions. So we make sure that we put on just the right amount.
That's great.
The farm crops and stuff because of how much it's rising to get the produce?
Absolutely. One of our biggest concerns is how much the rising fuel costs and stuff have affected our overhead. Fertilizer costs have basically tripled in the last year. You all know what fuel has done. Chemical prices and all of that are petroleum-based products. So anytime the price of fuel goes up, our input costs skyrocket dramatically. And that's a huge concern for us right now, is if we're going to get enough out of our commodities to offset the increase in our expenses.
And would it be cost effective to go organic?
That is a very good question too. It's a market that is growing and becoming more popular all the time. But even with organic crops, you still need fuel, and you still need other costs. And the problem with organics is you have such a reduced yield with organics that you have a lot less to sell. So it's kind of a trade-off. Our crop is harvested in the month of September, early October, and then the crop goes into storage. We keep it in storage. We start selling the crop right away, but we also keep onions in storage clear into March and April. And our onions go all across the United States. We deliver to the East Coast, Philadelphia, Baltimore, New York, down into Miami. We send onions to Mexico. Very rarely do we send onions to Japan and Korea, but we have a little bit in the past. We send onions to Canada and pretty much every state in the U.S.
How many hours a day do you work in the fields?
Well, my typical day starts about 6:30 in the morning, and I'm usually home by 7:30 or 8 at night. But not every hour is spent out in the fields. But obviously that's where a majority of our time is spent, yeah. And it varies, you know, it's seasonal. You know, in the summer, of course, longer days, longer hours. In spring and the fall, the days get shorter. So it varies a little bit depending on the season, but our average work day, I guess, is basically from 7 in the morning till 7 at night.
How long have you been in agriculture?
Well, people ask me that, and that's a hard question to answer because I grew up on a farm, and I can remember working on the farm when I was 8, 9 years old, and I'm 51 now, so I've been at it a long time.
Even how do you clear the snow in winter?
You know, we don't clear the snow in winter, not off the fields, okay? We let it pile up because that snow in the wintertime, it melts, gives us moisture in the ground, and you know, here in eastern Oregon, we basically live in a desert, so all the moisture we can get and put in the ground is that much better for us. So we like a lot of snow, and we just let it melt slowly into the ground. Yep.
What do you do in the winter?
What do we do in the winter? That's a good question. In the wintertime, we take these onions and we sort them, we size them, we grade them, we put them in bags, and we load them on semis and send them all over the country. We load about 500 semis a year on our farm. But you have to remember there's 20,000 semis that go out of eastern Oregon every season. 20,000 semis of onions go all over the country. The country eats about 400 semis of onions a day is what this country consumes. Our farm supplies enough onions for the nation for one day. You can eat them.
No.
Gotta remember, the onions we grow here are kind of hot. These onions here are kind of hot.
No, thank you.
How is it?
Pretty hot.
Anybody
I
else?
think I need water.
Who's gonna be the next daredevil?
Sam?
Or both.
You can have an onion sandwich.
Sure.
Sure.
Do you like onion sandwiches? Tell us how you like them.
Two down.
What's your favorite way to eat onions?
Fried.
Two down.
With a batter or just sauteed?
Just sauteed.
Hey, how about you guys? Do you want to grow a garden? Maybe be farmers someday?
Be farmer.
You want to be a farmer?
Yeah.
Cool.
There's a place out past old Bully Creek Road where all the willows weep and the locals go. We break out the fiddles and sing at the sky. Cattails join swing side to side.
Oh, Oregon, we can grow anything and eat anything.
Firefly.
Say that one more time, please.
He said what are my monster trucks about?
What are monster trucks about?
Yeah.
You know, I don't know a lot about monster trucks. I know they're really loud. I know they're really tall. And they kind of drive them over cars kind of in a contest to see who can go over the biggest pile, I think. So I don't know a lot about it. What's that?
Okay.